at the end of the book, after describing my experiences in Moscow as ambassador through the war, through the first 6 or 7 months of the war, when I left Moscow in September of 22 and retired the next month. It is vital to the national security interests of the United States and our NATO allies and the world and those who believe in the UN Charter that Putin not prevail in Ukraine. When the rules-based international order worked the way it was supposed to, in 1990, when another global leader decided, with grievances, Putin's got grievances, some of them legitimate grievances. Saddam had grievances too against Kuwait, shared oil field with Kuwait, but he claimed Kuwait as Iraq's 19th province and invaded, sacked Kuwait City. And the rules-based international order back then, we all think of President George Bush, 41, assembling the coalition, 37 countries, 500,000 US troops in the Gulf, in Saudi Arabia to defend the kingdom, all authorized by the UN Security Council. The UN Security Council passed multiple resolutions authorizing the use of force to expel Iraq from Kuwait. The Soviet Union voted in favor. The PRC abstained. The rules-based international order worked back then. Won't work now, at least through the United Nations. My policy prescription, and I didn't have enough space in the book to spell it out in more detail, nor do we have enough time here for me to fully explicate it, but let me summarize it this way. Kennan is famous, in his writings after the Second World War, is famous for providing the inspiration for the US containment strategy with respect to the Soviet Union. Kennan's original conception of what containment meant, I explain in the book. It changed over the Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson administrations. This is how Kennan described it, the civilizational struggle between the United States and the West and the Soviet Union, that the Soviet Union needed to be confronted not exclusively or necessarily militarily, but culturally, politically, in every way we could to show that our system, our values, our principles were superior. And that ultimately, when confronted with that type of containment strategy, that the Soviet Union would collapse, and it did. Now, there were many things that happened in implementing that containment strategy, whether it was Vietnam, you name it. There was the risk of nuclear war. I believe that how this war ends, it will only end on terms that the West can live with if there is a Kennan-style containment resisting Russian military aggression in Ukraine and containment of Soviet aggression elsewhere. Kennan-style containment. If we fail to do so, imagine how Putin is going to react. Consider this, when Ukraine, the Ukrainians, led by Zelensky, successfully resisted that major onslaught by the special military operation, the thrust south from Belarus to Kyiv, the attempt to sack Kharkiv, capturing large parts of eastern Ukraine. When the Ukrainians push back, the Russians can't take Kyiv. They collapse in Kharkiv. The Ukrainians recapture Kherson. Do you know what the polls showed? Bipartisan consensus of fulsome support for Ukraine, 85% in the polls. When the going gets tough, when the Russians fight back, when the Ukrainians don't expel all of the Russians from all of the Ukrainian territory that they'd captured, waging an aggressive war, and I detail this in the book, it's a crime against peace. Those who started the German aggressive war against Poland, they hanged at Nuremberg. When the going gets tough and we say, we can't afford it, it's not worth it, why are we defending Ukraine's borders when we're not defending our border in the Southwest? That completely misses the point. It's as bad as what's happened to Ukraine is, and I am as is evident in all that I've said, and I've written, a huge supporter of Ukraine and admirer of Zelensky and his government's historic resistance. The real interest of the United States is stopping Russian aggression. I would be making the same argument whether the country that had been invaded was Moldova, Romania, Bulgaria, you name it. We can't let a permanent member of the UN Security Council with the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the world fabricate a rationale for starting the largest war on the continent of Europe since the Second World War, doing what it's done to 15 million Ukrainians, as I said before, killed, wounded, internally displaced, or refugees, and have them succeed. If we do, and we shift from when it looked like the Ukrainians were going to win, it's going to make what we did, as disgraceful as it was, as awful as it was, our withdrawal from Afghanistan is not, saying it will pale in comparison is a dramatic understatement. It will empower Putin. It will empower Xi. It will empower those who believe, as Putin does. We in the United States, politicians in the United States, we as Americans, if someone says, do you believe in endless wars? Hell no. Putin doesn't mind endless war.
You know, I had some trivial thing that I wanted to say to end this, but it would interrupt the grandeur of the statement you just made. Would you all say thank you to Secretary?